Hey folks, welcome back. I'm going to give you an overview to blueprints. So previously in some of our other tutorials, we had created this door that when you approach it, it opens, and when you move away, it closes. We had done this using a trigger box, and we had also used the level blueprint to do this. That wasn't the most efficient way to do things, and so we're going to take a look at a more efficient way to create blueprints and have interactions. And we'll also, at the end of the tutorial, take a look at how to do it even more efficiently, building these things up from scratch. You don't need to use our template in order to be working on this. You can do this in any level. You can actually just create a brand new file if you want to. But if you'd like to work in a world that looks like mine, and you haven't done the other tutorials, you can go ahead and download the project file from the link in the description. Okay, so what we're going to start off with first is I find that a really good way to test how things are working requires that you know where these trigger boxes are. So what I like to do is start by creating a basic cube under Shapes Cube. And I'm just going to put that down near the ground. And I like to make this a little marker on the ground by changing the scale to 0.1. And then I'm just going to hit end to smack it down to the ground. And this is going to be our demarcation that says, when I stand on this platform, something should happen. So the way that we take an object and turn it into a blueprint is we don't go up here and open level blueprints. Instead, we go to our details tab and we hit this button right here that converts this actor into a blueprint. So I'm going to click that. It's going to default to creating a new subclass of actor. That all works for me right now, but what I am going to change is the name. Unreal from Epic typically starts all their blueprints with BP. I've gotten in the same habit, BP underscore, and I'm just going to call this BP underscore cube. And I'm going to select that, and it will then pop up a new blueprint window that has our cube. This has the event graph that we're used to from working on blueprints previously. But it also has a viewport where the model that we've attached our blueprint to shows up. So I have this cube here, and what I'm going to do is up here under components, I'm going to go to add, and I am going to create a new volume, a new collision volume to act as a trigger. Now, when we did this before, we used a trigger box, but when you do it through here, a trigger box is not available. If I say add, and I type trigger, it's not going to show anything up. So instead, I'm going to look for collision. So what I'm going to use here is box collision. The box collision defaults to being the shape of whatever object you're using. So I'm just going to pull that up and show you that that's not working for us. Or actually, it doesn't really default to that shape. It looks like this shape's a little bit too small. What happens is it takes on the scale. And because we scaled our cube down to 0.1, it means our box is being scaled by that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale of the X to 1.5, the scale of the Y to 1.5, and then I'm going to change the scale of the Z first to 100 so that we can, first to 10 so we can see what it would normally be like. And then I'm going to try changing this to 20, and that's looking pretty good. Maybe I make it 25. And then I reposition this just a little bit so that it's hovering above. If I compile and save, and then look at my scene, I now see that I have this as my blueprint. I can move this around. I'm just going to drag it over somewhere where it's easy to get to and to test. Let's bring it over here. And let's drop it to the ground with the end key. Okay. So one really quick thing that we can do to make sure that this is working is if we go to our event graph, we have 3 built-in functions. Event begin play, so whenever the game starts, this is triggered. Event actor begin overlap, so whenever anything overlaps the collision volume, it's going to fire this. And then event tick, which is a update multiple times per second and is not something that we're going to use. We're just going to use event actor begin overlap. So the way that I begin scripting is I pull this off, and then I can type in whatever command I want to use. So I just want to test that my trigger is working. So I'm going to say print string. And so whenever I collide with that box, it's going to print hello. I'm going to compile that so that it works. I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to press play to test this. So I can see the box, the cube, the marker on the ground. I can walk up to it, and when I enter, it says hello in the upper left corner. When I exit and then re-enter, it says hello. So it's only whenever I'm entering. And right now, there's nothing happening when I'm exiting. Okay, so if I have that set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a teleportation pad. So when I step onto this box, I am going to teleport the player somewhere else. So the way that I do that is I'm going to leave my print string on here for now, just as a debug so I know it's working. I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to say set actor location. There we go. And now it's going to be looking for what do I want to relocate and where do I want to relocate it. Well, if I leave this as self, it means that when something collides with it, it's going to teleport itself, meaning the trigger or the collision and the marker somewhere else, and it's going to teleport it to 0, 0. Well, the first easy thing I can do is I can say, I don't want you to target yourself. I want you to target the thing that is colliding with you. I'm going to drag this off and place this here. Compile this, and I can now test this, and it will just teleport me back to 0, 0. So I have 3 things that are telling me that this is working. Let's do that again. The first one is when I hit this, it's going to say hello in the upper left corner. The second thing is if you look down at my blueprint where it says print string, you'll see that it fires. There we go. You get that white line turning red, getting thicker, and also a series of spheres and then arrows pulsing through it. That's telling me that that is working, and this can work multiple times. And then the third thing is obviously that I'm being teleported. Okay, so teleporting me back to 0, 0 isn't terribly useful. What I want to do is say, well, when I hit this, what if it teleports me up here? So in order to figure out that location, I am going to create a new cube, and I'm going to move that cube somewhere where I can understand its location. So that's location for that cube is showing up as 2150, 450, 600. And so I'm going to bring this window back up, and I'm just going to type these values in. 2150, 450, and 600. Perfect. I'm going to compile this, and now if I move that out of the way, it will teleport me to that cube, but I don't really want the cube to be there, and I don't want to teleport myself into an object, so I'm going to delete it. So now I'm going to step onto this. I will be teleported. I see that the blueprint is firing, and it also said hello in the upper left-hand corner. So I know everything is working. Okay. The nice thing about these teleportations is it also keeps your momentum. So if you're running or if you're jumping and then it teleports you, you're keeping that running or that jumping momentum. All right. This isn't particularly useful to hard code these values in here. What is a better use of the script or a smarter way to program this is to use a variable. So I'm going to go down here to variables. I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this n for new, loc for location. And I'm going to change this from a Boolean to a vector. A vector will allow me to save an x and a y and a z. I'm going to drag that location into my blueprint and say, get this variable, and I'm going to plug that in to this new location. Now, before I do that, I might just quickly on a piece of paper jot down what these values are, because when I do this, it's going to wipe out those values. The other thing that I can do is just going to use my notepad. I'm just going to pull in my notepad and say 2150, 450, 600 in case I forget. Pull that off the screen, connect these values. There we go. And now it's going to teleport me to that location. right now there's nothing that is setting that location, so it's going to be back to 0, 0, 0. If I click this little I next to the variable, this makes the variable public. And I can select the variable here, and I can change all those settings here, just like I'm doing down here. I'm going to compile this, and then I'm going to move this window out of the way. Now, when I select my teleporting cube, what's going to happen, let's scroll this, slide this up just a little bit. There's now something called nloc that is showing up in my settings for this object. So I can now type these values that I have, 2150, 450, and 600 into this. And when I press play and I test this, it's going to teleport me to that same location. That's pretty awesome, because it means that if I wanted to have another one of these, if I went to my content drawer and I dragged another cube in here and I moved it to another spot, let's put it back down on the ground. Actually, let's put it over here so I can get to it after I've teleported once. Move that down to the ground. And now I'm going to need a new location. So let's, oh look, I still have some bushes on top. Interesting. Okay, we're going to go and say new shape cube. I'm going to put it up over here, and let's say 260, -40, 800. Delete that. Select our new teleport. That was a new loc of 260, -40, 600. Press play, and now I hit this first one, it teleports me over here. I hit the second one, and it teleports me on top, and unfortunately sort of into the surface of the roof. So this is pretty neat, because it means that I have created one blueprint, but I can put multiple blueprints in the scene and have the values for the teleportation change to different locations. This is super handy. Teleportation can work. If I had a trigger for a door, can be making the door work. I could have a variable in there for the amount of time the door stays open before it closes. So there's a whole bunch of possibilities for how I can use the power of these public variables. But let's take this one step further. Let's go into our blueprint for this again. Now I have that window open over here, but if I close it, there are a few ways that I can get this back open. The easiest thing that I can do is if I select it and go up here, I can say edit BP cube. The other thing is if I find it in my content drawer, I can right click it and I can say, actually, why am I right clicking it? I just double click it and it opens up the blueprint right there. Okay, so what if in addition to setting the actor's location, we wanted to do something else? Let's drag that off and let's say set actor relative scale 3D. Okay, so in my mind, relative scale means what scale are you now and what scale do I want to make you? But that's actually not the way that it works in Unreal. Relative scale means that it's relative to when the object was originally created in the program. So if I change this to new relative scale is going to be 2, 2, 2. Ooh, wow. 2, 2, 2. It means that it's going to scale up twice, but it's only going to, if I do it repeatedly, it's only going to stay the same. Now, if I test this, it's going to scale up the scalar, the teleporter. It's not going to scale up the actor. Let's just see how that works. Let's compile. I'm going to save to make sure that if I crash, I don't lose my my changes here. So I'm going to hit this one, and it teleports me, and you can see over there that that teleportation pad is now twice as big. If I hit this one, that one's now twice as big too. Okay, so a couple things. First off, I'm going to change this to be a little bit higher because it's teleporting me into the floor. And then the other thing is what if I don't want to have these values be the same? What if I want to have different values? And what if I want to have it scaling the correct thing? Well, I can take this other actor and I can also plug it in over here. So both of these are going to be using whatever has collided with this in order to use as the target. Now, another way to create a variable is if I drag this off, I can say promote to variable. And that's an easy way of making it the correct variable type, which in this case is our new relative scale. But I don't like that name. It's too long. It has spaces. I like to say new scale. So our new scale, we want to make that public. And I'm going to compile and save. And I'm going to select this one and say this one, 222. Sure, let's scale it up. And this one is going to be 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Now if I test it, if I hit this one, it sends me over here and I'm now twice as big as I used to be. So I can't get back in that door. And if I try, I actually am going to accidentally bump that teleportation again. And you can see I'm the same size I was. And if I hit it a third time, I'm still the same size. But now I can hit this other one and it's going to shrink me down. And I'm now half the size I was. Not half the size I was just a second ago, but half the size of what I was when I started. So that's what relative scale does. It scales you to a size that is relative to when you started the game. Now, a couple things. First off, what I would really like to do is, instead of having these lines go all the way across here, what I can do is I can drag this off and say promote to variable, just like I did over there. But this time I'm setting a variable. I'm not, let's move this up. I don't really need this test right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it out of the loop. And there we go. So when you get a variable, when you're getting a variable, it happens whenever this is being triggered. But when you're setting a variable, you need to tell it when you want to set it. So when this fires, it's going to set the variable of the thing that collided. And then I can use that variable here as my target. Over here, I can drag other actor in, get other actor, and I can plug that in there. And let's just clean this up. I'm going to hold Alt and click, which breaks the connections, and then I can replug that. So there we go. A little bit cleaner. And now I'm setting a variable for the actor that is colliding with the trigger zone. This should all work just as perfectly well as it did before, but let's do a quick test. This one doubles my size. This one makes me half the size I was when I first started. Now, one important thing to notice is you can see that I'm moving really, really quickly here. When we scale the player, it scales the size of the player, but it doesn't change how high they jump. It doesn't change how fast they move. So things that are small, closer to the ground, move at the same speed, but feel like they're moving faster. Things that are bigger, same speed, but feel like they're moving slower. This is why if you play a shorter character in a first-person shooter, you're running at the same speed as a taller character, but it feels like you're going faster. Okay, so setting this other actor variable, kind of handy, just cleaning things up, but it also allows us to do some other things. So I can also, let's make some space in here. I can say, I'm going to right click and say get actor scale 3D. Or actually, so excuse me, get actor relative scale. So I want to figure out what their scale is at that moment that's relative. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this other actor again and plug it in here. So I'm saying, hey, that thing that collided with me, what's the size of it? And then I'm going to take the size that I want to use and I'm going to multiply them together. So the way we do that is when we drag one of these off, and I'm going to drag the top one, and then we type in the multiply, Shift 8, and say multiply. Let's break this connection for now. Move this a little farther out. I'm going to multiply these two values by each other and then plug this in here. So for one of these, it's going to say, hey, what's your size? Multiply by 2, and then this is going to be tongue 2. The other one is going to say, hey, what's your size? Multiply by 0.5, and this will become 0.5. Let's compile and save and press play. So this is going to be the one that doubles my size. So now I'm twice as big. But now that I'm twice as big, if I hit it again, now I should be 4 times as big. Oh, I accidentally hit the other one because I'm so big now. Let's hit that again. And I can hit it again. And it'll just keep making me bigger and bigger and bigger if I don't accidentally hit the other one. And then this one will keep making me smaller and smaller and smaller. I think I'm now back to normal. Now I'm at half size. Now I'm going to hit quarter size. And the problem is I'm going to get so small that you can see I'm going to start clipping into things. I can't even find where that thing is now. Here we go. It's going to make me, might have to jump. There. Now I'm tiny. I'm going to start clipping into the ground. So if I was doing this in a real game, a real experience, I would probably want to, there we go, now I'm tiny. You would want to set some minimums and some maximums. I'm not going to show you how to do that now, but it would basically be doing a check for what size am I. If the size is smaller than such, then set it to the minimum. But that's really what I wanted to do for a quick introduction to these things. This sets you up to start doing things like, there's a series of tutorials called the coin tutorials, and that will help you do things like pickups, collecting items, and it will also introduce ideas of on-screen text. But this was a more basic introduction to blueprints overall, and really trying to set things up so that you have the knowledge when we start getting into the more complex settings. Thanks for joining, and in future tutorials we'll also look at a way to have more control over establishing these conditions and setting all this up. Thanks for joining, and let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, join us again for another video in the near future.